anticipated trip to Asia, where he will attend numerous summits in a region battered by his hardball trade policies. His 5-day tour will start in Malaysia, which stops in Japan and South Korea, and will be his longest journey abroad since taking office in January. US and Chinese officials have started talks in Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit to discuss a trade deal ahead of face-to-face meetings between their respective presidents later this week. This comes as the US president threatens Beijing with a new 100% tariff, while China imposes restrictions on rare earth minerals. US President Donald Trump says he's open to meeting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un while in South Korea, adding they get along very well. He also confirms plans to meet Brazil's President Lula da Silva at an ASEAN summit in Malaysia, saying tariff talks could be on the table under the right circumstances. At least 8 people are injured after Russia launches a ballistic missile attack on Kyiv, igniting fires across multiple districts of the capital. Fire crews rush to affected areas as non-residential buildings burn and a kindergarten is damaged, marking another escalation ahead of winter. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has accused the United States of fabricating war after it sent the world's largest warship towards the Caribbean in a major escalation of its military buildup in the region. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier to move to the Mediterranean Sea last night. The United States has struck another vessel in the Caribbean, killing 6 people it labels as narco-terrorists, the US Defense Secretary said. While Hegseth did not provide any evidence of what the vessel was carrying, a video was published on social media, and the Defense Secretary stated that the vessel was operated by the Tren de Aragua gang. The United States has imposed sanctions on Colombian President Gustavo Petro over accusations that Bogotá has failed to stop the flow of cocaine into the United States. Trump has previously called Petro an illegal drug leader, a claim that the Colombian president strongly denies. Kirill Dmitriev, the Russian president's special envoy, says the Russia and the United States and also Ukraine are close to reaching a diplomatic solution to end the war in Ukraine. Speaking to CNN after arriving in Washington for talks with US officials, he said that a Trump-Putin meeting had not been cancelled but merely moved to a later date. Okay, we start this hour in the United States, where Russia's President Vladimir Putin's special envoy for investment and economic cooperation, Kirill Dmitriev, has said that he believes Russia, the United States and Ukraine are close to a diplomatic solution to end the Ukraine-Russia war. Speaking to reporters after arriving in Washington for talks with US officials, Dmitriev has said that a meeting between Donald Trump and Putin had not been cancelled as the US president described it, and that the two leaders will likely meet at a later date. The planned summit was put on hold as Russia's rejection of an immediate ceasefire cast a cloud over attempts at negotiations. Trump said he cancelled the planned meeting with Putin in Budapest because of a lack of progress in diplomatic efforts towards ending the war and a sense that timing was off. However, Dmitriev has said that he believes that Russia and the United States and also Ukraine are, quote, quite close to a diplomatic solution to resolve the conflict. Meanwhile, Dmitriev has also said that Europe aims at disrupting any possible direct dialogue between Russia and the United States. We're now joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, and he joins us live from New Delhi to discuss these statements from Vladimir Putin's special envoy from Washington. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us on these latest updates. Okay. Some strong statements there from one of Vladimir Putin's closest men. quite contradictory. Of course, we've seen some pushback on that meeting from Donald Trump, cancelling that meeting in Budapest, which we thought was going to be some sort of a breakthrough, a possible breakthrough. However, there seems to be some hope from the Russians that there is some sort of diplomatic progress that's going to be made between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. Your thoughts on the statement here from Putin's special envoy, Dr. Popovsky?
Yes, Thomas, you correctly put it that it's a hope, and he said, I believe. And that's a manipulation. No other signal we see whatsoever to have any progress in Russia, specifically to end this war. So what Dmitriev is saying is simply a nonsense. They try to do that. They try to be open and to say we are happy to negotiate. And when it comes to any negotiation, Russia is the party that refuses ceasefire. It refuses to accept what Donald Trump even demands. So absolutely nonsense to believe that without a major change in the position of Kremlin, any such meeting can deliver. Well, a meeting may happen, like the one in Alaska, which produced zero effect, zero, nothing. And what Russia is doing is exactly the opposite of that. You mentioned the bombing again overnight in Kyiv. Kindergarten has been hit. The same happened every week.
Professor,
sometime.
We'll talk about that in just a second. What are your thoughts on the fact that Dmitriev said, no, this meeting has not been cancelled in Budapest between Trump and Putin. It's merely been postponed. This leader-to-leader dialogue is going to happen, this grand meeting in Europe between Putin and Trump. Trump said it had been cancelled. What are your thoughts on the envoy's statements there?
Well, it has been cancelled, obviously. It won't happen. Maybe in the future, probably, but that's what Dmitriev says. He said it was postponed but not cancelled, which is again nonsense, because we don't see any signal from Washington or from Budapest or from anywhere. Actually, Trump is going to meet the Chinese president. He's going to Korea. He has other plans. Obviously, Russia is not in his priority, and that's bad news for Kremlin. And all they can say is that it may happen sometime in the future. But when there is a signal that such a meeting can happen, Russians always go back and they keep striking and they do not cooperate. For them, that's the only chance left, to try to persuade that they are open for diplomacy. But in fact, they are not open for any diplomacy. They want to continue the war. So a statement which I will just leave aside as another propaganda, as another nonsensical statement by Dmitriev. It's not a news for me.
Who has the White House right now, Professor Popovsky? We've seen, of course, Zelensky releasing statements. He seems quite not smug, but he seems satisfied by the way things are going. Obviously, he does want those tomahawks. He is obviously getting those face-to-face meetings with Donald Trump, and they seem to be going much better, of course, than they were earlier in Donald Trump's presidency. Who has Donald Trump's ear now?
Well, definitely Zelensky is the hero here. He met 3 times the King of Britain over the last months only. He's everywhere. He's in Europe, he's in London, he's in Washington. He talks to every leader in the world freely. He flies everywhere. Of course, not everything can happen quickly, but the support Zelensky enjoys in every capital in the world. And compare that with Putin. The only countries Putin can go is Mongolia, North Korea, and China, and that's it. And Alaska once, but never again. So this is the geography of Putin's trip, Mongolia, North Korea, and China. And look at Zelensky, who met the King of Britain 3 times in the last 6 months. So what does it tell us? Who is the leader that the world support and invites, and he has been everywhere, not only in Europe and America. Zelensky was in Asia, he was in Saudi Arabia. He meets everybody he wants to meet, or make phone calls to Prime Minister Modi or of India and so on. So in terms of diplomatic isolation, and Russia feels that every day, that's why Dmitriev talks about possible postponement and one day in the future we may meet Donald Trump. That's the only thing Russia is left with. Some hopes that one day in the future Putin can meet someone. It might not happen. A war criminal indicted by the International Criminal Court cannot go anywhere in those 123 countries signatory to the International Criminal Court. He can go to Mongolia, by the way, a signatory, but Mongolia allowed him once to go, but nowhere else. So the geography of Putin visits is very limited, and it will be even more limited.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us. We have further developments coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has hosted a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in London with French President Emmanuel Macron joining via video link. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has thanked Western allies for new sanctions aimed at crippling Russia's war economy. He urges partners to boost Kyiv's long-range missile capabilities. Zelensky also says diplomacy matters only if it leads to real decisions. He adds the more losses Putin suffers at home, the faster he will consider meaningful talks. Let's in fact listen in to what the Ukrainian president had to say.
Diplomacy matters only when it can lead to real decisions. And when it comes to Russia, that dish has many ingredients. The essential ones are real forms of pressure on Russia, sanctions, our long-range capabilities, political pressure, accountability for war crimes, and real actions regarding Russian assets. Today, besides, we are carrying out our own campaign of pressure with drones and missiles, specifically targeting the Russian oil sector. So the long-range capability directly strengthens diplomacy, the more losses Putin suffers on his own territory. The fewer assaults he can carry out on the front line, and the faster he will agree to meaningful diplomacy. That is why we are working to secure Tomahawk cruise missiles, additional Storm Shadow missiles, other capabilities. Thank you very much, Keir.
Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron announces that France will deliver additional Aster anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine in the coming days. This comes as Western allies ramp up support for Kyiv amid Russia's ongoing offensive. The meeting comes as the war enters its fourth winter, with the US and EU pressing Moscow harder than ever. Now over to Ukraine, where Russian drone and missiles have killed at least 2 people and wounded more than a dozen in multiple regions of Ukraine. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has said that Russia has struck the Ukrainian capital with missiles and with drones. The mayor has stated that the attack has damaged buildings and homes in multiple districts and wounded at least 8 people. The mayor has added that 3 people have been hospitalized and that large fires were seen in non-residential buildings in the Desnyansky and Darnytsky districts. The head of the city's military administration has said that damage has occurred in the Dniprovskiy district as well. The attack comes as Kyiv's Western allies ratchet up pressure on Russia as the war enters its 4th winter. Earlier, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged allies to bolster Kyiv's long-range missile capability a day after EU leaders took steps towards funding Ukraine's defence for another 2 years. The United States and the European Union also announced new sanctions this week on Russia's energy aimed at crippling its war economy. We are now once again joined by Professor Popovsky. Let's first of all, Professor, dive into why does Ukraine want these long-range missiles when it's trying to defend itself from Russian aggression?
Well, certainly, Ukraine has absolute justification to have the long-range missiles because the way to defeat Russia is to bomb military targets only military targets, so energy infrastructure, oil refineries, and to reduce Russian military capacity to fight the war. Airports, where all these strikes and missiles come to Ukraine, as you mentioned, the daily civilian targets in Ukraine should be prevented by the long-range missiles that Ukraine wants. So absolutely justifiable in every war. Ukraine should be given every weapon it wants, as long as it can hit into the Russian territory, military target. Ukraine is targeting only military objects in Russian Federation. Never ever we hear those civilians, very few collateral damages, once in a month. But every day almost we hear about civilian casualties in Ukraine, which basically suggests who is hitting civilian targets and who is hitting military targets. Ukrainians need that long, and the good news is that we more and more often we hear that the West, Europeans, United States even mentioned tomahawks, as you said, Thomas. Yes, the direction is going there. Yes.
And of course, the diplomatic strategy here is Russia is saying that it wants peace, but Donald Trump isn't blind to the news. He sees these things going on. He sees the news of people dying every day, and the civilian casualties. What is the aim of Russia here in these strikes, especially when he hits these densely populated areas like the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv?
Of course, we don't see any willingness to negotiate in Russia. We discussed this earlier. So basically, this is a manipulative statement that Russia wants diplomacy that never get any diplomatic achievement so far. And the question about the strikes, well, they need some good news. Putin wakes up in the morning and there is no good news. Trump canceled the meeting in Budapest. What is the good news of Putin in the morning? That some children in Ukraine were killed by Russian drones. That's the only good news Putin can have. He's isolated, as I mentioned before. He cannot go and meet any other head of state around the world, apart from North Korea. So the only good news for Putin in the morning, and the military tried to please him with some good news by saying, we capture a village over there, but 2 days later they lose that village to the Ukrainians and they don't report that. So the only strategy for Russia is to give Putin some good news to please him. And the only good news is that 2 civilians were killed in Kharkiv, Kyiv, Odessa, or anywhere else in Ukraine. So there is absolutely no movement of the Russian army. By the way, do you know this famous anecdote that the snail, the slowest animal in the world, if a snail moved from Bryansk to Berlin in February 2022, that snail would have reached Berlin today. So the advance of the Russian army for 3.5 years can be compared with the speed of a snail moving from Russia to Berlin. Snail would have been in Berlin. Russia is not even in Pokrovsky.
Yes.
So that's the picture of the Russian success.
Professor Vasily Popovsky, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now move on over to North America for our next story, where Prime Minister Mark Carney has said that Canada is ready for further trade talks whenever the United States is ready, after President Donald Trump announced that he was ending negotiations over an anti-tariff advertising campaign. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made this statement before departing for Asia. Earlier, Donald Trump terminated all trade talks with Canada after taking issue with an anti-tariff advertisement sponsored by the Canadian province of Ontario. The ad featured quotes from former President Ronald Reagan criticising tariffs, which Trump called fake and egregious behaviour. Following Trump's announcement, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said the province would pause the ad campaign to allow trade talks to resume. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump, while departing for the Asia trip, said that he has no intention to meet with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during the Asian summit in Kuala Lumpur, and that he's disappointed in Canada. However, the primary agenda of Carney's trip is to forge new trade and security alliances to reduce Canada's economic reliance on the United States. Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to meet ASEAN leaders along with the leaders of South Korea and Japan. Let's listen in to some of his statements.
And we stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, because it will be for the benefit of workers in the United States, workers in Canada, and families in both of our countries.
Let's move south for our next story, where Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has accused the US of fabricating a war after it sent the world's largest warship towards the Caribbean in a major escalation of its military buildup in the region. Maduro has reacted to the situation. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Se están inventando una nueva guerra eterna. Prometieron que más nunca se metían en una guerra y se están inventando una guerra que nosotros vamos a evitar. ¿Con qué? Nadie les cree lo que dicen, pero no pudieran decir que Maduro y Venezuela tenemos armas de destrucción masiva. No se han atrevido a decirlo, por lo menos. No pueden decir que estamos construyendo un arma nuclear. No pueden decir que tenemos misiles apuntando a las ciudades de Estados Unidos. No lo pueden decir.
Meanwhile, the United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered the USS Gerald R-4 aircraft carrier, which can carry up to 90 aircrafts, to move from the Mediterranean. The US has been increasing in its military presence in the Caribbean, sending warships, a nuclear submarine and F-35 aircrafts to the region. We have some further news from the situation, where the US Defense Secretary has also said that the US carried out another strike on a vessel allegedly operated by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua that was trafficking drugs in the Caribbean Sea. The Defense Secretary has stated that the strike killed all 6 men who were on board and took place in international waters. He added that it is the first strike that took place at night. Hegseth also highlighted the 2 other strikes that took place on Tuesday and on Wednesday, both of which took place in the Eastern Pacific, and called them as designated terrorist organizations. He did not offer any evidence of what the loot was on board. We now are joined by Shruti Dasgupta. She is an international affairs expert, and she joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, let's first start with that huge warship, the aircraft carrier, the biggest in the world, can carry up to 90 aircraft on board. A huge provocation, you can call it that, certainly. What are your thoughts on this, and what is Venezuela expected to do about it, if anything?
Well, you're very right, Thomas. Greetings to you and your viewers. It's such a big movement, is an aggressive posturing in a military capacity by one of the world's largest economies. And it should scare anybody, because specifically a nation of the size of Venezuela, this warship is a stance of intimidation to show them that if you do not bow to whatever they ask of you, you shall face military consequences and a direct regime change. So for me, this particular movement is alarming, because it shows that no matter how much criticism is coming through towards USA for its actions via various countries, it is not deterred from its summary execution of various boats that they claim to have drugs being used to transport drugs with. So it is very sad that a nation like USA is now revealing its really bully side, where towards a nation which is very, very small in comparison to it in terms of military or economy. So I think this should tell the world that US will stop at nothing, and the UN does not have any teeth in the game because it is unable to control any economy from destroying the other, any nation from hurting the other. And I would love to see some sanctions coming down on USA for something like this.
Yeah, and Shruti, of course, this is not the first time this has happened. We've seen on social media the US and the Pentagon release more images of the US sending a missile and blowing up one of these boats. 6 people killed in this incident. Once again, no evidence offered, and what cargo was on board. The US have claimed that the men on board of this was part of the Trenda Aragua gang, but once again, we have no evidence of it. Is there any responsibility, any international body that can hold the US accountable here?
I wish there was, because the UN reports themselves show that Venezuela, although a transit corridor, is not a nation responsible for USA's drug problems. Now, I would love for USA to answer why it's not shooting boats off its own coasts. Why does it have to wade into international waters and then shoot down one particular nation's boats? I'm sure there are more nations, specifically Mexico, Colombia, who are sending boats across through the Pacific. Why are they not shooting down those boats within US waters? They don't do so because in a recent interview by a US representative, they said 25% of the time they are wrong about the assumption of which boat is carrying what cargo. So if right now, hypothetically, 40 people as claimed are dead because of US execution in international waters, at least 10 of them were innocent. Beyond sending this Gerald Ford US Marine ship, they're also going to hold a military exercise in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is just off the coast of Venezuela. Tell me how this is not putting pressure on a nation to bow to what USA wants, despite the fact that Venezuela is under US sanctions. And in August of this year, they have worked out a trade deal and Venezuela oil has started to flow into USA again. So I don't understand what they truly want out of Venezuela until unless it's a complete reversal of its socialist economy, which is under Chavez and then now Maduro being conducted, a nationalization of assets which they want to reverse. Until unless that particular intent is their actual goal, I don't see their actions actually stopping the drug problem of USA or even being justified under any national or international law.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you on these issues. Here on NewsX World, of course, we will bring you all the updates on that escalating situation between the United States and Venezuela. Well, that is all that we have time for this hour, but keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world. Thank you.